Welcome to today's webinar, where we're diving into how ProConvey and NPTN are digitising the customer journey for faster, smarter sales. I'm Matt Hahn from LMS. I've been involved in resi property for about 24 years or so now, and I'm joined by someone who lives and breathes improving the customer estate agent conveyancing journey, Chris Scantlebury, the co-founder of ProConvey. Chris, great to be discussing this with you.
Yep, thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me. My name is Chris Scantlebury. I've been in conveyancing for over 10 years. I've been on the front lines of the legal work, and I'm really looking forward to showing you what we built today and how I think it can help streamline your pipelines.
Thanks very much, Chris. So the plan for today is I'm going to kick things off. I've got a bit of a PowerPoint. It won't be death by PowerPoint, I promise you. But we'll go through a bit of background, a little bit of NPTN and what we're doing as part of this collaboration with ProConvey. And then Chris will give a demo afterwards. We have got the Q&A function set up in the top of your screens there. So if you've got questions, please feel free to ask. We'll do our best to answer them. It's likely we'll get to them at the end of the webinar rather than during it. So as I say, please chuck things in if you want to as you go. So first of all, I mean, we were actually going to deliver this webinar largely to estate agents, but it actually turns out we've got a very mixed group of people. We've got some tech suppliers, conveyancers, estate agents, all sorts on the call today. So we have changed some of it, but there are a few slides that look as if they're aimed at estate agents. But certainly when I was an agent for many, many years, there were two of a number of numbers we looked at. The first being time to exchange, and the second being the fallout rate of the deals we were putting in the pipeline. Because, as you can see from the slide, they had a few impacts on what we were doing. Revenue predictability, when you agreed a deal, whether you knew or not when it was going to go through, bankings, etc., etc. But there are, unfortunately, a couple of statistics attached to that in my 20+ years have never really changed in terms of the home buying and selling process. The first is the number of transactions that collapse. It's about 31%, give or take, of all those that get agreed. The second figure there, the 179 days, listen, it varies. 20CI's recent data is 134 days. I think Rightmove had it up at 200 days at one stage. But ultimately, it's just too long. And actually, that figure has got worse. The 1 billion figure, there is a very good report called Fixing the Broken Chain that was done by Santander, quite well worth a read. But the economic impact of those two figures are pretty large. Now, when you look at technology and what's happened over the last particularly 10 years or so, there's been some fantastic tech that has come in, but the problem we feel is that it's been quite vertical. It's worked in silos in that it tends to solve problems for the individual stakeholders in the process. So either for estate agents, conveyancers, mortgage brokers, etc. But what it hasn't really done is solved the problem across those stakeholders. And therefore we sort of see the problem at the moment as a horizontal problem rather than a vertical problem, if I've explained that correctly. And to sort of take that a step further, really, the home buying and selling process is set up with very, very different stakeholders, estate agents to conveyancers to banks to mortgage brokers. They all have very, very defined roles. They're very different roles. Some of those have grown over a period of time. At LMS, we talk a great deal about how much extra conveyancers are having to do, how much extra their PI insurance is nowadays. But it does mean that it's quite a fragmented process for the consumer. Data is collected multiple times, as an example. There's no shared visibility across that chain. And again, it sort of compounds those problems. And that fragmented element isn't just in each of the stakeholders. Again, it's across the process. So when we look to the future and we look to what is coming next, there is a greater movement towards digitization, really for a couple of reasons. I think there is a consumer expectation shift. We've got a lot more digital natives. You've got that sort of Amazon Prime generation where people expect things to be able to happen in a far smoother fashion. My wife and I joke about my 15-year-old daughter, is actually able to access our Amazon account with a card on her phone and something arrives the next day, and that's for a 15-year-old. I'm not comparing that, by the way, to the home buying and selling process, not for a second in terms of that speed, but there is a consumer expectation shift. We know from evidence that the digitization of the process can add efficiencies to it. The one example we talk about again as a business, and Chris and I have talked about quite a lot, is if you look at open banking. Now, open banking itself can help the home buying process, but that's not the reason for putting it up on the screen here. I think traditionally banking has been seen as a very traditional sector. But back in 2016-17, I think it was 8 or 9 banks did get together and created open banking. What used to be very closed loop systems, they opened up. They allowed fintechs to sort of bolt on in and create. When you go into a shop and you tap your card on that little white box, that is a fintech plugging into the banks, moving the monies around in between them. And we're now at a stage where there's millions of transactions per month. So in a relatively short space of time, and again, where you'd think it's competitors, they've actually got together and improved the process, both for the consumer and the banking process. I should probably add actually on that note, and I had it in my notes, but it is more than just digitization. What we're also talking about here is smart data and horizontal digital integration or interoperability. How does the information get collected at source in a digital fashion? How is it machine readable? How is it able to be reutilized across the stakeholders to speed up the process, to improve the consumer journey ultimately? The Department for Business and Trade recently brought out a report in January. It's very long, it's about 142 pages, and it is across many, many different sectors. But they talk about, in the executive summary at the beginning, smart data as enabling customers to make use of the data that companies hold about them through the secure sharing of that data with authorized third-party providers. Now, when you put that into a property sector context, we're talking about standardized real-time consent-driven sharing of the property and consumer data. When we look at the slide that I'm talking about here, that sort of ties in with the Smart Data Report, with the Data Use and Access Bill, which passed in June of 2025. Again, that was quite a key element governmentally to allow the sharing of elements like ID, etc. But again, the other interesting thing, and I'm quite conscious that I sort of live and breathe this, so it's this just my world, but there is more and more noise around digitization, around smart data, around a change needed somehow in the process to improve it for the consumer. Land registry are digitizing, and there's other bits and pieces that are going on in the process to improve it as well. We do talk about sometimes hits, which is a bit of an interesting subject to deal with, but in theory, and again, I very much appreciate his theories, the idea was right all the way back then, but the mandation of it, the timing of it, the collection of that data was paper-based, was very cumbersome, was very time-consuming, and arguably that data wasn't able to be reused. So why now? Again, some of the governmental change, some of the digitization, some of the drive from bodies like the OPDA really rather make it feel that alongside consumer expectations, now is a time when change can happen. So where does LMS come into that? You know, why are we here today? And that is really around the National Property Transaction Network, or NPTN. What is NPTN? NPTN, the idea is that it's a network or a platform that sits in the background. It facilitates the movement of that digital data, but facilitates the movement of it in a way that the provenance and the veracity of that data can be seen, so it can be reused. If we talk about something simple like an ID, that ID, the source of that ID can be a third, fourth, or a CREDAS ID, drops into the platform so that other stakeholders down the process, the conveyancer, the mortgage broker, where relevant, can see that information. They can see where it's come from, and therefore they can rely upon the source of that and reuse it without having to go and collect it again. In terms of a sort of a comparison, one I quite like, if you look at broadband and how that operates, you've got Openreach in the background. They are the network that the facilitator of the movement of that broadband data in the background, and you've then got companies like EE, Virgin, Sky that plug in to collect that data and that are consumer facing. NPTN, the idea of it is that we are that Openreach. We sit in the background, don't interfere in processes, but more facilitate the movement of that information. Ultimately, really to front load as much of that as possible in a format that it can be relied upon and it can be reused. So part of what we're trying to get to is not to interfere with what the different stakeholders are doing, more to facilitate the collection of relevant data. You know, at this early stage, material information, ID, TA forms, searches as early as possible. Ideally, instruct a conveyancer at the very beginning, at the point a new seller comes to market, to engage a conveyancer to get that file on their desk, and again, to facilitate the movement of that data. Now, we as a company are relatively well embedded in the home buying and selling process. We obviously provide a digital ecosystem of products and services between the conveyancing market and the banks. But we do have a touch point with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of transactions already. So the idea is that we want to create this network, this live, shared, structured data that can be moved around and can be reused. Again, you know, to get small wins across the process, to reduce the fall throughs, to give earlier sight on potential issues in a transaction. There is more to come involving the banks and the mortgage brokers in the coming months that will be announced, that again will add to potential benefits that we are offering. But it is all about creating this network for moving the data in the background. What does it deliver? Well, the idea is earlier sight on the information, ultimately to get to faster exchanges, to supply that information to conveyancers earlier in the process, to reduce fall throughs. Interestingly, when you look at ProConvey, and Chris will talk about it in much more detail, it's also a much better consumer journey from start to finish, how they're first onboarded with the agent, and actually how that information is moved. If there can be, again, it's a very generic number, but you know, if there can be much more of a target of around 28 days or 6 weeks for exchange, it does give that predictability. It does give a much better consumer journey. And as per the slide, it's all around reusable ID, material information, searches, greater visibility on what's going on, particularly when you expand it out to chains. If you've got a whole chain involved in NPTN and there's far more visibility of the data that's moving around, again, much more of it is surfaced earlier in the process. And of course, a single source of truth as another point. I touched on it again, and I always think, you know, if the government are getting on board, that's quite an interesting signal that there really is beginning to be change. These sorts of changes tend to be driven by private industry. Again, you've got bodies like the OPDA doing an enormous amount in the background, consulting with the government, driving things along. It would be useful if you end up with a sort of a government wrapper, policy wrapper around what's going on privately. But it feels as if there's a change in the market. I think there's one or two of the conveyancers on this call that are involved with us already, but there are some very, very forward-thinking stakeholders in this process who have come to us and are involved. And I think that makes it very exciting indeed, how we utilize smart data, how we utilize open standards, the government governance and rules behind that data to allow it to be shared. Again, I keep using the term data. It's information, it's ID, it's material information. It's that sort of thing that I'm specifically talking about at this stage. Again, the plan is that it'll grow, but if we can get small wins, if we can surface information earlier in the process, it surely will benefit those involved. And I put this up as a last slide before I sort of hand over to Chris, but the most important thing is the consumer, is that journey that they have in terms of buying a home. It's a very, very emotive area in this country, our home buying and selling. Our home is our castle. And if it's taking 150 days, 200 days, if it's costing money to the economy, to the consumer directly through fallouts, something really should change. That process should be improved. And again, if it's a better consumer journey, hopefully all of the stakeholders benefit as well. There is that more predictability on revenue. There can be more cases going through, more comfort that the case will go through. Again, banks are in the same situation as estate agents in ring fencing money. If that doesn't go through, it costs the banks money, same as estate agents. Conveyancers is a slightly more complicated setup, but they work for their client. That's the most important person. So I put this up as a final slide really before I hand over to Chris, because everything has to be around the consumer. They're the most important actor in the group. That's who we ultimately all work for, and a better journey means everybody wins is a feeling around this. Chris, I think that's the end of my slide, so I'll stop sharing, but perhaps now would be a good time for me to sort of hand over to you and allow you to take over.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Matt. I'm going to share my screen. If you could just give me a thumbs up too.
Yeah, let's see. It's just coming up now. Fabulous. Yeah, I can see that.
Brilliant.
And just whilst Chris is doing, again, we've got the Q&A bit there, guys. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please feel free. But yeah, Chris, let's see. Let's get a demo. Talk us through
it. Yeah. So thanks for that, Matt. Really interesting. I think what you've discussed there and with regarding to the shift in the industry is happening right now, and what I'm about to show you is how we're doing that and how we're complying with these new reforms and what the industry's kind of reaching out to us for. And then I'm going to do a little demo at the end just to show you how a fast track sale case kicks off, and then what the client sees and what the lawyer gets, and then we'll follow up at the end with any questions for any of you guys for me and Matt to try and answer. So obviously, I mentioned earlier, I'm Chris Scantlebury. I'm co-founder of ProConvey. I worked in conveyancing for 10 years, and during that time, I just consistently saw conveyancers spending a large amount of their day chasing missing information, or myself, agents struggling to keep their pipelines moving at the start of a transaction, and just confused clients really was the main one. Lots of clients at the start of the transaction not really understanding the process of what they needed to do. So that's why I built ProConvey. ProConvey manages referrals. It does ID, AML, UTA forms, material information capture, title deed retrieval. It does quite a lot, and it's all from one place with one login and shared visibility for all of the parties. But today I'm going to specifically focus on one of our features, and that is the fast track sale. So before we do get into a solution, I just want to make sure, and I might reiterate on some of Matt's points, so apologies if I do, Matt, just the problem in the industry or the problem that we're specifically trying to solve. So typically at the start of a sale, there's information requested multiple times by the agent, by the lawyer, by third parties, often usually the same data, just maybe in different forms. And then early stages are just full of repetition, manual work, and delay for all the parties involved. The onboard is usually manual. The law firm sending out letters, ID and forms, chasing source of funds and signatures. Again, not working with the agent though, just doing this siloed to each other. And then because of that, they're chasing each other for updates. The agent, the conveyancers, the clients, all chasing for updates on the same piece of information. And that's just one of the reasons that these transactions fall through, just not being organized at the start of a transaction. The delays, because of this missing information, they stack up from any time from that property being marketed to exchange. And I think we're all familiar with that. That's the market we're in. There's slow starts, repeat requests, and fragmented information. Just wastes a lot of time. And what we're trying to do is to solve that. But before we just do get into the solution, I want to just talk about the issues and why they matter. So all these delays, when the information isn't available early, inquiries get raised late, searches are returned later. Now, it's not necessarily that there's any issues in that data. It's just if you find out the information earlier and there is any, you can deal with that a little bit sooner. So there's missing documentation as well. So even if the information does come back sometimes from the clients, it's missing stuff, it's incorrectly filled out. So all of this, ID, MI, the AML, the verification ones, they're all mandatory before the legal work can begin anyway. So it just makes sense to capture these early before any work stalls, leaving days or even weeks of a delay on this. And then the manual repeated work. So every single time a form is rekeyed or an extra document has to be chased or similar documents, that same information is asked from different parties. It's time that's paid for by you, by your clients. It's not moving the transaction forward, actually. And then the lattice structured data is what we're working with ourselves on the PDTF, but also in line with NPTN. And when that system is structured and shared digitally, it can be reused later on in the transaction, whether that's to populate forms, whether that's to report to the clients or to the agents. And from a law firm perspective, none of this is an administrative headache necessarily, but it is a real cost. And this lies for me in with the agents having longer pipelines, slower commissions, frustrated clients, those fall throughs. And I think it matters especially today because the transaction process only seems to be definitely not reducing, if anything, getting longer. So I think it's frustrating, it's costly, and it's just really not efficient. And that's why all of this matters. But the market is shifting, and I won't touch too much on this. I saw Matt did a kind of market shift slide as well, but I think sellers and buyers are expecting a digital journey now. It's, as Matt just mentioned there, everything's immediate to them. They're some of the clients I imagine now going through conveyancing never filled a form out in their life, I would imagine, so they are expecting that digital consumer journey, and conveyancing with its paper forms. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just about to say there was a really interesting, it is a bit old now, but there was an OPDA report, or a survey, I should say, that was done last year of about 5,500 people. Again, actually quite a good report/survey to read. But that report found that I think it was 82% of those in the survey would do a digital journey, and 79% would be willing to share their information across the chain for that information to be used. So sort of backing up what you're saying there, that report was quite interesting reading.
Yeah, it feels archaic, right, by comparison to some of the other countries and some of the other markets that you've mentioned. I think, you just need to look at the other countries to see the gap. I think in some countries they move double the amount of in the UK just because it's such a less stressful experience. Again, everything's gathered up front, Singapore being one of them and a couple of others. So that's one of the reasons the customer's expecting the digital journey. As Matt kind of touched on, the government focuses on upfront data. Policy is shifting now. The consultations are explicitly stating that upfront property information is required at listing. Proposals include reducing the transaction times by several weeks, lowering the fall through risks, and just benefiting what the agents and the lawyers are telling us they need, which isn't a theoretical at the moment. It is being written in line with the Project 28 governments, and all trying to commit to just earlier legal instruction, And then on top of that becomes the shared data standards. So now the NPTN, the OPDA, they've created reusable, interoperable property data. That's benefits really hugely firms like ourselves or the NPTN that are trying to speak to each other and share that data. So now having a framework that we can all commit to, as well as having that open layer what NPTN are building, it's giving all of us great opportunity to be able to work together because you have great tools for all kinds of things. There's great tools for now SDLT calculators, there's inquiry management tools, there are fantastic tools out there. They're all working in silo, and the NPTN and the OPDA are allowing us all to work to a single shared framework so we can share data and work more closely together with each other. And then the information is readily available now. So that's a really key one. The difference now between back in, let's say, the 2000s and the initiative when HIPs were discussed is that the building blocks exist today for this now. The governments are pushing it. The industry bodies are building standards. The technology platforms are integrating and working together. And what it really means is that information, this upfront information, isn't just a nice to have anymore. It is going to be inevitable in the industry. So now we've shown you the problem and what's happening in the industry. What do you need to win in this new industry? Well, very simply, faster progression and faster exchanges. It's a world now where buyers and sellers expect speed, they expect certainty. That wait 3 weeks after an offer is accepted before any work will begin is just that's in the past now. So compliance isn't just a tick boxing exercise anymore. It's going to be a differentiator. So the agents we work with that understand the material information, the ID, the AML requirements, they reduce the surprises later, and they're not chasing data, repeatedly asking for information. It's just how compliance should be done. It's upfront, it's shared to everyone who needs it. It's done at the beginning of a transaction. Properties backed by verified upfront information. This is for the buyers, really, seeing key legal data and compliance checks are already addressed. They're more confident, they're less likely to stall, they're more committed and likely to progress that. And fewer surprises lowers the chance of late stage issues derailing that deal. And again, the digital experience, I think it goes without saying that if you're still running transactions through PDFs and emails and multiple different portals, the experience for the consumer is going to feel dated by comparison to other industries in the market right now. And I think it's going to change the way that transactions feel for the clients. I think it's the second most stressful experience of your life. They say, right, hopefully we can bring that down. So what ties all of that in together that I've just mentioned? Well, this is our fast track sale cases, and that's what we're here to discuss. So I've just outlined some of the issues that the market's demanding with faster progression, less admin and duplication, upfront compliance, prepared listings, and that digital experience. And that's what fast track sale is built exactly on those principles. So instead of leaving the identity checks and the title deeds and everything else, we move these tasks right to the beginning of a transaction. And what's included in our fast track sale cases, and it's no different than an agent simply making a referral. Really, you're putting in your client details, and I'll show you that in a moment, and sending it over to a lawyer. And what's included is everything that's here. All of this happens before the legal matter is even opened. The data is captured from either the client putting in some information or the public information being pulled in. It's not sent around as PDFs, and everyone's on the same system being able to view this data. So the legal team, once they receive all this, they're not starting from zero. It's just simply a better journey for the agents, the sellers, and the conveyancers to get all of these points that are needed to be done anyway in a transaction just put right to the start of a transaction. Really, this is a fundamental shift in the way how transactions are going to be done. Historically, I think typically every party usually has their own system. They have their own document silos, their own uploads, and they're all copying and sharing the same information. What we're saying is let's capture the information once with integrity and make it available where it's needed immediately for all of the parties to be able to view that information. And that leads us into working with the NPTN on this, though. So obviously we have all of that data up front. Now we come to the piece that's genuinely future looking, which is the NPTN. And it's why what we're building together isn't better just for the individual transactions. It actually aligns with where the industry is heading on a structural level with this new upfront and shared data. So it's not a new portal, the NPTN. It's not a place to upload your documents. Is a shared data infrastructure which is designed around the idea that transactions should be verified, structured, shareable, reusable, and across the entire ecosystem. So agent through to lawyer, lender, search provider. Yeah, it's really, really exciting time to be working in them. I won't go too much into that. I know Matt touched on the NPTN a little bit himself there. But what NPTN does as well, opens us up is when you can make them referrals, you can make a referral through an NPTN panel. So it opens the agents up to be able to work with law firms who are, future-proof, I would say, the agents, and trying to get ahead of the curve. But what I'm going to do now is give you a live demo. So let me know if you can still see this. So this is ProConvey, the conveyancer side, guys. This is the agent. And this is the client. Okay, so I'm going to be switching between screens. I didn't want to, I just wanted to let you know. But what I'm going to do here is very quickly, as an agent here, I can see a fast track sale case I've referred through. This one here is at 100%, which we would have seen if it loaded there, which you can see the tasks that the client's done and exactly where they're up to. And again, as we mentioned, on the conveyancer side, you can see this shared visibility of exactly where the client's up to as well and what tasks they've done, just keeping the agents off the phone. But how we kick off one of these cases is we were going to add a case for our committed seller, and we can give them a fast track sale essential or a fast track sale plus. And the essential is the full onboarding, the TA forms, the declarations, the material information, absolutely everything you could need, what you see in that other slide, but doesn't include the searches. The fast track sale plus includes everything again with the searches. That's a regulated search pack and an indemnity policy that says if the buyer's solicitors will not reimburse the seller for these searches, then we will. So that's they're the two products. So we'll kick off one with searches here. And the estate agent is going to put in these details just about the property, about themselves. So who the case handler is and the address and price of the property. And then they're going to select freehold or leasehold, and that's going to kick off the correct TA forms in that case. So we'll say freehold here and hit next. So that's creating the case now in the background, pulling in that public information, gathering the searches, and just putting the information into the case for you. At the next stage here now, you're going to get to add your client or clients. So we could add a new client. I'm just going to add an existing client here, and we could add another client if we wanted. But then what we're going to say is, what task do we want this client to do? So we want them to sign our instruction letters as an agent, and we want them to do an ID check as well. Interestingly, when they do the ID check, it's obviously a shared result. So one ID check, lawyer and the agent both get a copy of that. So we're going to invite this client now. So we've now, as an agent, kicked off a case. We've ordered searches, material information's in the case already. We've invited our client to do their onboarding, and we're just adding them into the case to get themselves ready for their transaction. We're now going to link directly into the land registry, and
Chris, when you say invited the client, you mean that an email has gone out to that new client of the estate agent, does it? That's how they receive that invite, via email?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So the agent would now get an invite via email, asking them to complete their onboarding, and they would click that link and log in. I'll show you that in a moment. And then they just run through the tasks one by one. Once this case, and I'll show you in a minute, does get referred over to the lawyer's side, when the lawyer kicks off their case, accepts that case, they will also say what tasks they want to do, and then they will also be in the client side for them to do them tasks as well. So it's one shared portal for the client. Yeah, and I'll show you that in a moment. So in every fast track sale, we include the register, and you can get the other land registry deeds if necessary. So we'll order the register on this one. And then the very last step, now that case has been created, is you can make that referral over to one of the law firms. So if we just come here, so we're going to complete the case creation process, and now we can make a referral. So we're going to make a referral through the NPTN and the LMS panel. Click that. And then we're going to fill out the NPTN quote generation form. So we're just going to fill out a couple more pieces of information. These will be auto-populated shortly, but for now we're just filling them in, and then we're going to generate quotes. After we've selected any of the flags like shared ownership or auction, just select a few of the toggles, and then we're going to generate quotes. It's going to link directly into the NPTN now and list the firms which are available to accept this fast track sale case. And we're going to select here the NPTN firm in Manchester, confirm and instruct. But before we do that, if we wanted to, we could actually send the quotes to the client and get them to choose their lawyer rather than us doing it for them on their behalf. So we can do that as well if that's how you want to operate. We're just going to select this one as the agent. And okay, so that's been instructed now. The law firm's been notified. The client now, if we come across here, so this is already a live case. This isn't the one we just set up, but just to show you, the client's going to log in and have their cases that they're available, that they're doing their fast track sale onboarding on. So we're going to click into this one here, the very first one that's just set up. And the client's running through their tasks now one by one. So signing their letters for the agent or the lawyer, making payment on account, filling out the forms. So I'm just going to fill out a form to show you how simple we make it for the client. For example, on every single question, we give them an explain this, just offering why am I answering this? What is this terminology? And they run through each of the questions bite-sized, being explained constantly as and why they're answering them. And every single task where they need to upload documents or mark add later, they're in there as well. So they're getting a full onboarding experience around name changes, around the property, around themselves. And they're just going to run through all of this and get themselves up to 100%. So we have other tasks in there as well. Yeah, Matt.
And what I love about this, Chris, is just that, actually people don't move home very often, and we are talking about something new. So the fact that it does go through on a step-by-step basis with explanations makes it a really simple but effective onboarding process. And this is the first touch point for me when an estate agent has won a client, so they've secured them, and actually this is their first experience. Instead of that agent needing to go out and get IDs and fill in forms and do bits and pieces, they can quite literally sit on their sofa with their iPad, iPhone, laptop and do all of this via your portal of an evening, hopefully with a glass of wine, and make their way through it in a really sort of step-by-step process. It just looks so slick for me.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's about No, it's hand holding the clients just through it. That's it. I think we found that they don't necessarily always need legal advice. In fact, at the start of a transaction, not often. It's usually just someone to take them through it, explain the process, and help them get themselves ready. And that's what we try to do as much as possible on the system here. Just make sure at every stage, if they will have questions, we're trying to answer them questions before they pick up the phone to the lawyer, you know. So on top of that as well, with providing that kind of step-by-step forms, we provide customer service to the clients as well. So should be loading up down here any moment. We do provide customer service, I assure you, to the clients. There's a little bot here that would load up, and it would load up a message here, and we could go ahead and we would speak directly with the clients, get them to the end of their onboarding, so they're not on the phone with the lawyers. There we go, or the estate agents asking what's going on here. So that will speak directly to our team. So let's say there's a world here now where that's 100%. We've come on this demo and we've completed that case 100%. What that case is going to look like is, as you can see, we got the fast track sale here case 100%. If we go into that case, we're going to be able to see the public information and you know, the progress that's shared by the agent and the lawyer, and then we can add in any notes and our contacts here. But what's happening is, as the client is completing this information, is going into the documents folder, that shared documents folder. And what we're doing here is any outstanding documents they've said as add later, we're letting you know. You know, the client said they're going to provide this later. All of the documents that are signed by the client, including the signing receipts, come and sit in here, again viewable by the agent and the lawyer. We've got the register we downloaded. If we did the searches, they would be in here as well, or any other land registry documents. The protocol forms completed and signed, and depending on what they answered in those protocol forms, there would be potentially additional inquiry forms as well. And then that material information report on every single case which comes in, which is relevant to the buyers, the agents, and as a ex-conveyancer, the one that I really liked was the planning activity, and it would take you directly to the planning portal to be able to view those decision notices on that case. So that's like a very quick overview of, you know, the fast track sale cases and how it works. Happy to do a more in-depth demo with anyone on the call and go into the nuances of it, but that's how it works. So there is a world where conveyancers, before memorandum of sale even hits their desk, has all of this ready, a contract pack essentially ready to go before the memorandum of sales even hit their desk. So that's the product, that's the demo. Did anyone have any questions yourself even there, Matt, before I move into the last steps?
Well, I suppose just to surmise some of it, and again, having worked in resi property for well over 20 years, it's interesting because it is collecting information that has to be collected anyway, but it's doing it in a really simple process at the beginning. The searches is an interesting point because, again, they'd normally be done by the buyers, but and there is digitisation going on by the land registry, but why not collect them up front? There are estate agents out there doing it. There are conveyancers working with estate agents to get sale ready packs in place, but this does it in a very smooth fashion. And again, why shouldn't a conveyancer be instructed at the point a property goes to market? Because I think that there also, for me, gives a few other indicators when you're talking about buyers and further down the chain. You've got a really committed seller. You've got someone who, in this case, most likely has spent a bit of money to get this information collated. They've also spent the time to collate it. So there's actually greater transparency for a buyer. And by us linking in with you guys to add that conveyancer aspect, to add the panel element, a consumer can still go and choose the conveyancer that they want to, with an accurate quote coming out early on. It feels like it all makes sense. It's a really slick journey, but also, again, as per the pilot, speeds up the transactions, reduces the fall throughs, gives greater transparency to the process. So it's just such an obvious collaboration between yourselves and us to help make some changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understood. Thank you very much, Matt. So as you can see there, we're running through, very simple for the clients, and hopefully we can speak to you, anyone on the call, and get more in depth with that. But yeah, thank you for your time there.
Yeah,
my presentation, there we go. Yep. So next steps, and I just wanted to bring up some next steps here for before you answer any questions. Let's have a look at what you can do. The three big themes today are: the market is shifting, faster, more transparent transactions are expected. Early information capture is going to remove those risk and delays and manage those surprises later on. The shared structured data through the NPTN means the same data set is working for the agents, the conveyancers, and the clients. And that's it. We'll have to take any questions and any further demos, and that's my bit. Matt, sorry, I don't know if you had any more slides, any presentation to do.
No, not at all. Listen, I think there aren't any questions in the Q&A, which is no problem whatsoever. But if anybody does want to chat with us, both Chris and I love talking about all of this, please drop us a note. My email address is just matt.hahn@lms.com. Got a team of guys our end, and I know Chris is supported as well. So if people are interested, have questions, want to talk further about it, want to talk really further about the direction of this, because again, a change is coming. There is smart data, there is digitisation, there is government intervention, and I think it's just probably more likely a case of when rather than if. And hopefully, Chris and I have demonstrated how we're sort of at the forefront of it. We're both quite passionate about it. So yeah, if anybody wants to chat it through, drop us a note, drop us a call, and we'd love to help.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying we can onboard your team very quickly, usually within 24 hours onto the NPTN and the panel and ProConvey. We can tailor your workflows based on any of your integrations that we've got, if how you prefer to operate, if we're working with them. And thank you all for your time today. I hope that it came across that this isn't just about technology and a new product. This really is about making transaction processes more predictable, more efficient, and for everyone included in that transaction.
Fabulous. Yeah, lovely. Thanks very much indeed, Chris. Thank you very much indeed for everybody joining us today.